What if the richest people on Earth are not rich because they are smarter, more innovative, or more hardworking than everyone else, but because of laws written centuries ago, long before electricity, cars, or even modern democracy existed? What if the game of wealth was decided hundreds of years ago, and all of us today are simply playing inside rules we never agreed to and barely understand? You've been told that money follows talent, that success comes from effort, that capitalism rewards productivity, that history moves forward and old systems fade away. But then explain this. Why do the same families, institutions, and financial centers keep getting richer generation after generation, while entire nations remain trapped in poverty no matter how hard their people work? Why does wealth always seem to flow upward, especially during crises? Why do financial collapses destroy ordinary lives, yet somehow leave the architects of the system even richer than before? The answer is uncomfortable, because the most powerful laws governing money today are not modern at all. They are more than 300 years old, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. To understand how modern wealth truly works, we need to travel back to Europe in the late 17th century. This was a world ruled by kings, empires, and constant war. War required weapons. Weapons required money, and money was always in short supply. Gold and silver were limited. Taxes were unpopular. Revolts were common. Rulers needed a way to fund their ambitions without collapsing their kingdoms, so they turned to an idea that would quietly reshape the world forever. For most of human history, charging interest on loans was considered immoral, dangerous, even sinful. Lending money for profit was banned or restricted in many civilizations. The logic was simple. Money itself produced nothing, so earning from it without labor was exploitation. But empires don't survive on morality. They survive on funding. So slowly, quietly, Europe changed the rules. Interest was legalized, but not for everyone. Banks, crown-approved lenders, and elite institutions were granted the legal right to charge interest. Ordinary people were not. In a single legal move, society was divided into two permanent classes: those who earn money by working, and those who earn money simply by owning money. From that moment onward, wealth gained a new ability. It could reproduce itself. Money no longer needed effort to grow. It only needed time and legal protection. Soon after, something even more powerful emerged: central banks. In 1694, the Bank of England was created. Officially, it existed to stabilize the economy and help the government manage finances. But in reality, it did something far more revolutionary. It allowed private financiers to lend money to the government itself and earn guaranteed interest, backed by public taxes. For the first time in history, governments became permanent borrowers. Debt was no longer a temporary emergency tool. It became a permanent feature of the system. And here's the part most people never realize. These debts were never designed to be paid off. They were designed to exist forever. As long as debt existed, interest would flow upward. As long as interest flowed, wealth would concentrate. And as long as governments depended on lenders, the real power would sit quietly behind the throne. At the same time, another set of laws was reshaping society from the ground up. Property, laos. For centuries, mucho Urobes land had been held in common. Villages shared fields, forests, and grazing areas. These commons were not owned by individuals, they belonged to the community. That changed. Through enclosure laws, shared land was privatized. Legal documents transferred ownership from the many to the few. People who had lived on and worked the land for generations suddenly found themselves The land didn't disappear. It simply changed hands. Those who owned land gained assets that produced rent and power. Those who didn't were forced to sell their labor to survive. And just like that, generational wealth was locked in place. If your family owned land in the 1700s, your descendants likely still own valuable assets today. If they didn't, you inherited the consequences. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the system was complete. Interest generated passive income. Property generated rent. Debt generated obedience. And all of it was enforced by law. For the first time in history, it was possible to grow unimaginably rich without producing anything at all. You didn't need to farm. You didn't need to build. You didn't need to invent. You simply needed capital, legal protection, and patience. Wealth stopped being about contribution and became about position. Then came the corporation. Corporations were granted extraordinary legal privileges. They could exist forever. They could own property. They could enter contracts. And most importantly, their owners enjoyed limited liability. If a corporation failed, the owners lost only what they invested, not their personal wealth. Losses were capped. Gains were not. Risk became one-sided. And this legal shield allowed wealth to grow across generations, protected from the consequences that ordinary individuals faced. These laws didn't stay in Europe. They were exported to the rest of the world through colonialism. Colonies were forced into debt-based economies. Their legal systems favored foreign ownership. The resources flowed outward, while interest and profits flowed back to imperial centers. This wasn't accidental. It was design. Entire regions were locked into systems where they would always owe more than they owned. And then, inevitably, the system began to crack. Every few decades, something strange happened. A financial collapse, a bubble burst, a crash, a panic, the South Sea bubble, the Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, modern banking failures. Each time, the same story played out. Speculation grew. Ordinary people were pulled in late, encouraged to invest, borrow, and believe. Then the collapse came. Jobs disappeared. Savings evaporated. Homes were lost, and assets flooded the market cheap. Who bought them? Those with capital. The same class, protected by the same laws. Here's the truth most people never hear. Financial crashes are not failures of the system. They are features. Crashes transfer ownership from the many to the few. And when the dust settles, governments step in not to erase debt, but to move Italiano. Private losses become public debt. Taxpayers fund bailouts. Banks survive. The structure remains intact. The rules never change. Only the players reset. Now, look at the modern world. Technology has advanced faster than any era in history. Productivity has exploded. Information is everywhere. Yet inequality is rising. Why? Because the legal foundations never changed. If you earn wages, your income's limited by time. There are only so many hours in a day. If you own assets, your income compounds. This isn't about morality. It's mathematics backed by law. Inflation quietly punishes those who save money. Cash loses value every year, but assets rise. Property prices increase. Stocks inflate. Real estate booms. Those who already own assets grow richer without effort. Those who don't fall further behind no matter how hard they work. Modern banking may look digital and sophisticated, but its core principles are centuries old. Fractional reserve lending, interest-based debt, centralized control. Technology didn't replace the system. It accelerated it. After every crisis, politicians promise reform. But notice what never changes. Interest laws remain. Property concentration remains. Corporate protections remain. Central banking remains. Reforms treat symptoms, never foundations. Because the people who benefit most from the system are the same people who fund politics, influence regulation, and shape public narratives. Now look around today. Housing crises in every major city. Young generations trapped in student debt. Wages lagging behind asset prices. Billionaires multiplying their wealth during global recessions. Different century. Same rules. The laws written hundreds of years ago still decide who owns, who owes, who waits, and who wins. This doesn't mean success is impossible, but it does mean the race was never fair. Some inherited assets, some inherited debt. Some inherited nothing, and the law protected those outcomes. Here's the first truth. Wealth is legal before it is personal. Money follows rules. If you don't understand, it will always work against you. The second truth. The system rewards ownership, not effort. Effort keeps you alive. Ownership changes your future. And the third truth. History keeps repeating, because the laws that shape power rarely change. Technology evolves, but power structures endure. So here is the real question. If these centuries-old laws created today's inequality, what happens when technology concentrates wealth even faster? And if the rules remain untouched, who will own the future? If this story changed how you see money, history, or power, then history has done its job, because the most powerful systems are not the ones you see every day. They are the ones you were never taught to question. One critical piece still remains, and it is often the most invisible one. These laws did not survive for 300 years by accident. They survived because they were wrapped in legitimacy, complexity, and fear. Over time, people were taught that questioning money systems was dangerous, unrealistic, or ignorant. Financial language became deliberately complicated, turning economics into a priesthood where only experts could speak. Education systems taught people how to earn wages, not how money actually moves. Legal systems normalized debt, as responsibility and ownership as virtue. Even democracy adapted around these structures, where elections changed faces but never the financial foundations beneath them. Global institutions emerged to protect the same logic at an international level, ensuring that nations followed the same debt-based rules or faced isolation. Currency itself became trust-based, no longer tied to real value, but to belief, enforcement, and power. And as long as people believed the system was natural, inevitable, or too complex to change, it remained unchallenged. This is why inequality doesn't just persist, it feels normal. Not because it is just, but because it has been legalized, standardized, and psychologically accepted over centuries. The most powerful achievement of these old laws was not creating wealth but making their outcomes appear unavoidable.